Good afternoon and a warm welcome from CENTA to each one of you. CENTA, Center for Teaching Accreditation, aims to make teaching aspirational. Today, CENTA and their learning partners TIS, Tata Institute of Social Science, with their initiative SIMHA, School Initiative for Mental Health Advocacy, welcome you to the third in the series of 4 webinars on supporting adolescent well-being and development. The objective of the series is to build capacity amongst teachers to address unique challenges that arise during adolescence. Today's webinar, Building Connections, Fostering Social Development in Adolescence, is to be conducted by Bhavna Sharma and Kavya Rajgopal. A warm welcome to all of you who've been attending all the sessions, as well as those who are new to today's session. Each session, even though connected with the others, is also a unique independent session by itself. So if today is your first day here, a warm welcome to you. Let me introduce Bhavna and Kavya. I know many of you have already known her, but this is for those who've joined us today. Here's a brief introduction. Kavya Rajgopal, Program Officer at SIMHA, is an educational psychologist. She graduated from Christ University, Bangalore, and her commitment to advocate mental health friendly schools and build capacity in stakeholders to nurture theirs and others' well being stemmed from her experience as a Teach for India Fellow and a Research and Training Associate. She has worked in schools and NGOs as teacher, teacher trainer, researcher, curriculum and resource designer, and a school counselor. And in her spare time, Kavya enjoys playing basketball and badminton, painting, dancing, learning languages, and taking part in adventure sports. That's a whole array of different kinds of things. Pretty amazing, Kavya. And we have Bhavna Sharma here, who's program coordinator for the School Initiative for Mental Health and Advocacy for SIMHA. She currently serves as an ethics committee member at the Indian Council of Medical Research in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. I mean, that itself is so amazing, the islands. And she's also in the official advisory team, the India counterpart to Harvard Medical School Research Fellow. Bhavna completed her master's in applied psychology and master's in social work and mental health from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She finished her undergrad from Miranda House, Delhi University, and she has been working in the mental health field for the past 9 years. She previously served as a mental health consultant for Azim Premji Foundation, Jindal Steelworks Foundation, Aditya Birla Chemicals, among many others. Outside works, she likes setting off on foot or on four wheels for expeditions and is loyal to her love for Assam tea, and she loves nurturing personal ties. So of course all of that, she'll probably always offer you a nice cup of Assam tea. So, but before I hand over the mic or the stage to Bhavna and Kavya, all participants, a warm welcome to all of you again, and a request. If you could type in your names and institute names, that would be wonderful. And please do type in any questions, for our facilitators will be addressing them at the end of the session. We will be sharing feedback form with you towards the end of the session. I would also like to inform you that all of you will receive participation certificates for the session. So please do fill out the feedback form that will be shared with you towards the end of the session. So join us today as we delve into understanding how to foster social development in adolescents and as teachers, help our adolescents maneuver through this very sensitive stage in their lives. So over to you, Kavya and Bhavna.
Thank you, Alokparna, for the warm and lovely introduction. It's always a joy to come back to this platform and get the opportunity to talk to all the teachers. And I'm joined here today by my colleague Kavya. In the previous webinar, this is the third part of the series. In the previous webinar, we explored largely, different emotional changes that adolescents go through. In this session, we'll gain a deeper understanding on what is called social development, one of the most essential part of this phase of an individual's overall development. Kavya, I request you to go to the next slide. We'll begin by exploring the concept of social development. We'll introduce the topic to all of you. That'll be followed by exploring the challenges that come along with this phase. And then we'll be talking about ways in which teachers essentially can support adolescents who go through this particular period of their life. And towards the end, we'll try and address some of the questions that you may have for us. Okay, so I'll start by asking this question to our audience, and if you can use the chat box to send us some responses. What is that one word that comes to your mind when I say social development? You can use the chat box. Another cue would be social development in an adolescent's life. What really comes to your mind? You could use one word to describe it. Do we have some responses?
Yes, there's I'll read out a few that I see. There's communication, adaptation, identity crisis, relationship.
Amazing. Interaction with people in society. Relations, that's coming up a lot. Responsibility, amazing. Adaptation. Identity crisis, as Divya says. Self-right. Peer interaction. Handling emotional outburst. Amazing. Helping hands. I mean, who better than teachers when it comes to, really asking what really this word may indicate when it comes to a child's life in this phase of them growing up. Right? Thank you so much for all your lovely responses. Society interrelationships. I think all of you have given us some very valuable words when it comes to social development and very relevant. Next slide, please. All right. So adolescence in many ways, as most of you would agree, is one of the most important stages for social development. This is the phase where all of us human beings tend to also socially develop apart from undergoing emotional, physical and also cognitive development. The process of social development moves adolescents from that's okay. This is a phase where it moves us from our limited roles in childhood, from the confines of our home to a larger social reality. This is what happens in this particular phase. Peer relationships start to gain more importance in this particular phase of our life. I think we go to the next slide. And this is also a phase where we start assuming greater responsibilities because we are getting in touch with people beyond our family. We start exploring peer groups, peer relationships who are part of not just our school, but also we have to be mindful of the fact that because of the prevalence of social media, our geography is no longer sort of confined physically. It goes beyond where you're located, right? So that is the kind of range that you're exposed to, and this is where your relationships also expand. This is also a period where one is more prepared for complex social roles in their life, and that also happens because of certain cognitive and emotional development that takes place. You feel more prepared to face the outside world. Apart from that, what really happens is this is a period where one starts an individual will try to gain independence from the family relationships, and they would want more closeness with their peer groups. Because this is such an exploratory phase, this is also where an individual tries to understand and is often faced with questions like, who am I? What do I want to do in the future? Because the individual is going through a lot of identity questioning, sort of exploring who they are, right? And because the ultimate goal in this particular phase is to create a sense of self, a sense of identity. Romantic relationships, I think most of you pointed that relationships are such an important part of social development. And this is what happens, right? This is a period where an individual becomes very curious about romantic relationships or generally relationships in life. And also they start exploring concepts of sexuality in terms of, this particular age phase. Kavya, we could go to the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. As you can see on the screen, the two big words for this particular phase is exploration and commitment. This is a phase where, at least for the large chunk of this phase, the individual is mostly in the exploratory mode, meaning that they are trying to understand what is it that appeals to them in terms of their interactions with the outside world, in terms of social groups that they are exposed to, in terms of different systems of society, right? Different institutions of society. It may be religion, it may be culture, in terms of broader interests, in terms of movies, music. So they actually go into a lot of experimental mode because a lot of exploration happens in the beginning, but commitment doesn't take place yet, at least not towards till the later part of adolescence. So when they are in exploratory mode, some of them may also sort of tend to indulge in risk-taking behavior, and that is something that we need to be mindful of and observe as adults, and create sort of provide that safe and secure environment for them so that they are able to explore accordingly. It's only towards the later part of this particular developmental phase that they are able to realize some of the values that appeal to them, right? And that's when they start committing to those values. For example, an individual may realize that the value of autonomy is what appeals to them, so that that particular value firms up for them. It could be value of pleasure seeking behavior, maybe. And it could be about certain, not just in terms of values of autonomy or things of similar sort. It could also be about values relating to their personality, their groups that they associate themselves with. I think before we proceed, I think I would like to also mention that Erik Erikson is one of the most famous developmental psychologists who becomes very prominent when we talk about this particular phase. He says that it's important to note that in this phase, an individual goes through a certain kind of conflict between identity formation and role confusion. So if identity formation takes place in a healthy way, if they find that support system, that safe environment where they're able to explore and therefore commit, they go on to become healthy adults. However, if they do not find that kind of support or opportunity to explore their own identity in a healthy way, they might be stuck in the phase of role confusion relating to certain dysfunctional behaviors. Go to the next slide, Kavya. Thank you. So some of the important or prominent domains of explorations are the following. They also tend to make a lot of career choices at this point in time. Again, remember, exploration versus commitment. So a lot of exploration may take place, but they may not yet commit. They also tend to realize a lot of their interest. It could be food, music. It could be sports that they want to play or not interested in sports at all. Gender and sexuality, I think, is a very important aspect that we need to be mindful of, that this is a period where one starts to recognize the gender that they are able to relate to more, or is it the same that was given to them by birth, or is it something different for them. Sexuality is another component that comes into play, as I explained in the previous slide. Values and opinions become stronger, right? This is a period where, so when you see a child, when you see an adolescent rebelling, it also is sometimes because some of the given realities do not appeal to them, so they have a tendency to question a lot in this phase. And that happens because this is very typical of this phase. It's not something abnormal, but this is only because they are trying to test out their reality and sort of ask them, do I belong to this space? Is this place something that is healthy enough for me, safe enough for me? Body image issues can also come about in this particular phase, because now they're so exposed to, especially in terms of social media, we have some very unrealistic expectations being set by social media, by movies. So as an adolescent becomes more and more exposed to such realities, If the self-esteem is somewhere low, if the sense of self-worth is low, it can actually take their body image issues can also sort of show up. And so as teachers, I think we need to be mindful of that. Sorry, I just got distracted by one very interesting question that has come up, and we'll try and address that later. So also, so I think as going forward, we'll be talking about how teachers can support, but I would encourage all of you to remember this particular slide when we talk about your role as teachers when it comes to supporting them across these aspects that they try to explore as adolescents. We could go to the next slide, Kavya. All right, now I invite Kavya to help us understand the challenges that come along with this particular phase.
Thank you, Bhavna. Great response. It's quite interesting, and I'm excited to respond to them and learn more from our participants. Before we jump into the section and really understand the challenges in social development, can all of you just mention what are some of the challenges you feel students, especially adolescents, face when it comes to social development or social skills? What are some challenges you see in the classroom or maybe outside in the hallways, in the corridor? Um, what are some social development related challenges you notice in the school? Some of you have already mentioned a few right at the beginning, but just to set the context for this section, acceptance, okay, alienation, very, very common, begins in adolescence and it's difficult to, navigate through it. Peer pressure, something all adolescents go through, providing themselves among the peer group, hesitation to take help. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that response. Help seeking as a behavior is a learned skill, and that's definitely one of the challenges in the social context. Dependence on family, change in behavior, body shaming. Um, they're unable to balance academics and romantic relationships right now. Suddenly they are so curious about multiple things that they're unable to focus on each at a time or prioritize it based on what is important right now. Identity crisis, bullying, especially, that's great because of a lot of the domains of exploration. The way they fit into a group, if they don't, if they stand out, all that can lead to bullying. That's something we will be talking about. Body shaming, reluctance to obey. That's right. Okay, thank you so much for your responses. Let's discuss some of these challenges in detail. So as a lot of you said, we'll start with parents. Okay, so we know our adolescents face a lot of conflict with parents or any authoritative figure, right? For this manner, the parenting styles, there are many parenting styles, right? Some parents are very strict, some might be extremely lenient, some might have a good balance of both, while they might also be neglect, right, in the upbringing or in the support that a adolescent gets. So because of that, there may be a lot of conflict with the parents and the adolescent on their value system, right? How involved do they want to be with each other, how much independence they want. Adolescence is also a phase where they're exploring different parts of their lives, and they might not be ready to invite their parents into that aspect of their life or of their life. For example, their romantic relationship might be really personal to them. They don't may not be ready to involve their parents into their what's happening with their peers. So because of this, there might be a lot of conflicted involvement, which is also added by some rebellious communication. So they might want to communicate with the parent, but because there might be a lot of frustration, they're going through a lot of changes in their body, in their emotions, their communication might come out as rebellious, and so that can create a spiral of conversations with the parents which might be rebellious in nature. um, Sometimes because adolescents, as we know, students or especially adolescents want this is tug of war between dependency and autonomy. They want to depend on people, they might want that support, but at the same time they really crave their autonomy. This is when they want to explore life by themselves, understand themselves a lot more. uh, and so there might be a lot of they might seem that what the parents want from them might be unrealistic, that they are unable to understand them. So there might be a lot of conflict on perception. Do my parents perceive what I want as important, as I say it to be? There might be also a lot of undesirable modeling sometimes from our authoritative figures. So if A lot of our adolescents are still learning how to behave in a social context. So if they see their authoritative figures behaving harshly, rudely, that's how they understand that this is how I behave with somebody who does not agree with me. So there might be a lot of unrealistic or unhealthy modeling that might come from an authoritative figure. So that can be another challenge in this phase with regard to parents or authoritative figures. Another challenge a lot of you mentioned was bullying, and this phase is highly characterized by it. So bullying is, why is it even a social challenge, right? Why are we including it in today's webinar? That's because it happens in a social context, right? It does not happen in isolation. It's not experienced separately when they are by themselves. It happens in a social context where there are other people involved and interaction is very common. So in bullying, there is always one person who's always more powerful than the other. The harm, the intention, there is a lot of intention while attacking the other person. And it happens for a long period of time. So it's different from teasing, right? Teasing might happen one off, and it might not be intentional, but bullying happens over a long period of time and repeatedly. So that's why it becomes a concern in the social context. There's that different types of bullying. So bullying can be verbal, where there's name calling, teasing, taunting, threatening. There might be social bullying, or in the social context where they try to exclude the person from a social group. There might be rumors. So these are very common complaints we hear our adolescents say, right? This group is not talking to me. They're suddenly not including me a part of their plans. They're spreading rumors about me. There might be also physical bullying, which is more visual, right? We can identify bullying very easily when it's physical as well. So there might be a lot of hitting, kicking. There might also be a lot of stealing, and rude gestures as well. Something very common in today's day and age is cyberbullying, and somebody also mentioned that in a digital platform, in that context, there might be a lot of bullying that sometimes is invisible but is still experienced. So that can be, impersonating somebody or imitating others online, sending hurtful texts, or again posting images or videos without consent. So bullying again is a very important and a very critical, I mean, very something that's experienced very intensely by most adolescents in this phase. Then comes gender and sexual identity. So what happens here is, I know as teachers, our role is limited, right? We might not be able to counsel students or provide psychological support or even guide them. Sometimes as educators, we might not feel equipped to have enough knowledge and resources to educate them, or we might be confused on how to guide them. So this is a tricky situation where we might need to consider what are the school policies, when do we call the parent, how do we reach out to professionals who might be able to support the adolescent. But what it essentially means is, so gender identity is when a person's self concept of their gender is called gender identity, right? And sexual orientation is how they want to be sexually oriented towards someone, right? How they feel about their partner. So that's sexual orientation, how they are their sexual association with somebody. And gender is how they feel about their gender assigned at birth. If they feel as the same gender assigned at birth, if they feel differently. And in today's day and age, there is a lot of conversation around this. There's taboos being discussed. The stigma is trying to be busted, right? Because we're trying to be more accepting of people's choices, and this choice making starts at this age. So it's very important as educators to, one, identify, do we feel equipped to have this conversation to support the student? If not, then can we connect them to a adult they trust, to another person who might be able to support them and guide them into this exploration. But however, neglect might be a little problematic. So it's important that we understand that this is, acknowledge that this is a challenge in this phase, and what can we do about it as educators. Are we feeling comfortable to guide them, or should we connect them to another trusted adult? um, I'll go to the next slide, one second. Okay. Some of you also mentioned peer pressure, which is commonly experienced. There were a lot of comments that said peer pressure. So peer pressure is nothing but peer influence, right? Sometimes this can be positive, this can be helpful, because adolescents, for instance, might start learning assertiveness as a social skill, might start learning how to communicate because of their peer influence. So it can also be positive, but it can also be unhelpful at times. And that's when adolescents take part in activities and behaviors that they do not believe in, right? And why might they do this? That's only because they might want to feel accepted and valued by the set of people who they feel close to, who they want to connect to, right? So they might not share those values right now with the other group of people, but just to feel a part, right? Just to feel fit in. Somebody also said fit in the comment. They might start feeling pressurized to behave a certain way, to say, to speak a certain way, to dress a certain way. So peer pressure can be seen in all domains, right, of exploration. Either it could be body image, the way they look, the way they feel about themselves. It could be in academics, it could be in their choice of career, in their choice of hobbies, music, in the activities they take part in. Also, there is a lot of risk taking behavior that's common in this phase. A lot of you also mentioned that rightly. So, and why does this happen in adolescence, right? Why do we feel that why can't this child understand that something is harming them? But that a lot of it is not in their control. In our brain, as we mentioned in the first webinar, this part which is responsible for a lot of reasoning, right? For a lot of reasoning, for a lot of problem solving, develops later in adolescence. But in the first half of adolescence, they're the part that is important for their emotions, right? For their feel good factor. There, it's called the limbic system, and it helps them understand rewards better. It makes them, it's just related to emotions that develops sooner. So they might take decisions that just makes them feel good for the thrill of it. That's because they're unable to rationalize it. They're unable to make sense of if this is right for me, if this is wrong for me, why and why not. So which is why a lot of adolescents might take part in risk taking behaviors very easily and unable to rationalize it in the moment. And also this is a phase of exploration, so they might be trying different activities, some influenced by peer pressure, some just out of curiosity. And with this growing independence, right, there's a lot of experimentation too. So sometimes it might be helpful, sometimes it might be unhelpful for the adolescents. Some of the activities they may be taking part in may be substance use, experimentation. It could also be with regard to body image. So sometimes to look a certain way, they might engage in certain behaviors that might not help them. Um, and then comes maintaining boundaries, right? In adolescence, we know they try to form very close associations, especially with their peers. And also there is a conflicted relationship, usually not with all adolescents. I'm not going to generalize it, but some adolescents might have a conflicted relationship with their parents as well. And in this process they might be learning to make their boundaries, though it might be a slow process. They'll have to understand what do they like, who are they, how do they want to be perceived, how involved do they want the other person to be. And so maintaining boundaries is another challenge where they learn how to make their own maintain their own boundaries. So boundaries are nothing but limits that adolescents set, right? To, and why do they do this? To protect themselves, right? And it's a way of asserting your self-worth, right? That this is what I will accept, this is the behavior I will accept for myself, this is a behavior I might not accept. Usually there are three types of boundaries, right, that as adults even we try to establish. One is physical boundaries. So that just means physical contact, right? How close are we allowing somebody to be next to us, right? Some of us, also this is something that started in adolescence. How comfortable are we with hugs? How are we, not if we are not comfortable with hugs, are we okay sitting next to somebody, close next to somebody? Are we not okay? So we start learning this in adolescence, right? We start understanding ourselves as an individual entity who has its own limits, who wants to be perceived a certain way and behave to it in a certain way. So physical boundary is something that gets established. Emotional boundaries is something that adolescents might feel challenged with at this stage, where they are trying to figure out if others' feelings and energies will impact them or not, right? How much will they let somebody's feelings affect them or not affect them? So that's emotional boundary. And there's also mental boundaries that adolescents start establishing. That is just to protect themselves against other people's hurtful words, ideas, or judgments, right? So they start thinking about, will, if somebody says something about me, do I feel bad or not? Is it impacting me or not? So in the beginning stages of adolescence, when they are figuring this out, when they're figuring themselves out, when they're understanding, when they're making different friends, trying to communicate with their parents, exploring different aspects of themselves, they might start understanding what is acceptable to me and what is not. But the process is not so simple, right? It's not so linear. It goes up and down, right? So they might explore something, they might understand with this set of people I'm comfortable with, I want to know what they think of me, what I might want feedback from them. But from a certain set of people, they might not want to accept that feedback, whether it's about how they look, whether it's about how they are doing on a particular task or their performance at school. So it's important to check with the adolescents, if they are, if somebody can give them feedback or not. But to be able to answer that, they might find it challenging, and it's a up and down trajectory, right? It's not very linear. So this is another challenge that adolescents commonly face. So in brief, swiftly, these were 6 challenges that we spoke about. Yes, and to our very exciting section of the webinar, what can teachers do? I'll invite Bhavna to start this section for us.
Thank you, Kavya. I think it was so interesting to listen to all the challenges that you explained to us, especially with the examples, right? I think, I'm sure that most of the teachers, all of the teachers were able to relate to some of the challenges and also gain understanding of some of the newer challenges, probably that they may not have faced, but is actually essentially such an important part of this phase. As Kavya said, we're coming to the more interesting, I mean, even the previous ones have been very interesting, but coming to the part of the presentation which talks about certain actionable steps and strategies that can be employed by teachers while they interact with this particular group. So, adolescence, like we've understood, is a very challenging phase for an individual growing up. Right, this is a period of a lot of conflict, a lot of challenges that come along. So this is also a period where they require a lot of support. Teachers are very uniquely positioned, because of the kind of time that they spend with you. And I think as teachers, you all end up playing such an important role in their lives. Going forward, when we talk about this particular section, we will be focusing on 3 broad categories. One would be about building a sense of awareness in the students about what really is adolescence, how much of their behavior, emotion, and thought process is such a normal part of growing up, right? Building that sense of awareness in them, followed by certain skills that can be built in this particular phase of their life, either by, conducting certain sessions on these or modeling such behavior, which then finally leads to certain behavioral management strategies, wherein we talk about reinforcing certain healthy behaviors that you observe in the adolescence and sort of also taking corrective steps if at all required. We'll go to the next slide. Yeah. I would like to start talking about building awareness of social skills. And here, I think what becomes very important is the skill of effective communication. Firstly, like I said, make them aware about, like, sort of demystify this whole concept of what is the challenges that we spoke about, right? This is something that can be spoken about openly and in a very sensitive way to the adolescents that you interact with. After you're able to build that sense of awareness, I think it's also important to normalize talking about certain very important skills that can come in handy for them as they try and interact with a larger group of students, which can be so diverse, right? When it comes to communication, so effective communication is a skill that I think is very important. And as a teacher, if you are able to model that behavior to them, that's a good starting point. 3 very important aspects when it comes to good communication skills, which will help them in this particular phase of life, would be active listening, appropriate use of nonverbals, and using I statements. Now, what is active listening? Active listening is a little different from just hearing or listening to respond, right? In fact, we as psychologists and therapists, when we are getting trained, this is one of the most basic skills that we have to also learn in our journey of becoming therapists. Active listening is a type of listening where you are paying complete attention to the person without having a tendency to interrupt in between, right? You let the person complete. You also check in once in a while if you've got it right, whatever is being conveyed to you, if you've been able to receive it right. So you just check in with them that, is this what you meant? Is this what you meant to say? Have I got you right? It also means that sometimes using certain nonverbal cues in your communication. Appropriate use of nonverbals is in a way related to active listening, I would say, wherein you sort of, sometimes nod your head just to show your level of involvement and focus in the conversation that is being told to you. Using I statements become very important, not just in your interaction with the adolescents or teaching them how to use I statements, but also in our lives as adults, right? What does using I statements actually indicate? It actually means using I to describe what you're going through in terms of your thoughts and feelings in a very blameless fashion, right? You're not blaming the other party. I would like to sort of substantiate this with an example. Something as simple as rather than saying you made me angry, you would rather say I felt very angry when you were not listening to me. I felt very angry when, or I feel very angry when you do not give time to me. Yeah, something like that. So in this way, in this one particular statement, just a little bit of difference in the way you've communicated it, what has happened is you're not shifting blames, you're taking ownership of the thoughts and feelings you might be going through. So that sort of opens up the channel for further communication. The other person doesn't shut down or doesn't react to you, and chances are high that they will be more opening to engaging in that conversation. And this, I think, comes in very, very handy when it comes to adolescents who are trying to build healthy relationships, trying to sort of create meaningful relationships, and they also are able to empathize with the larger lot. Yeah, we could go to the next slide, I think. Yeah. As teachers, I think also what becomes very important is to be mindful of the aspect of diversity and inclusion. Because when you're catering to a big classroom, we have people from different diverse backgrounds coming in, right? So it's very important to model and inculcate a sense of respect for diversity in your students. Wherein you open up the conversations about the differences that exist, model that behavior again. I think that's the most effective thing to do, wherein you sort of take a stand and sort of promote things like equity. Talk to them about how the system or the context that they are a part of, or the context that they come from, has a very important role to play when it comes to their identity. And also at the same time, their identity, the diverse identity also determines the kind of access they have to different resources. But also please be sure that when you're sort of initiating such conversations, you're sensitive to the different population who are part of that same group, so that you're respectful to each of their identities. You need to come from a place of non-judgmental attitude and sort of give them that safe and secure environment, making the classroom a more safe and inclusive space for all of them. Go to the next slide, please. This is an interesting activity that can be employed at the classroom level. It's called the myth and fact activity. You can start by giving out an instruction to the students, wherein you say, I'll read out a statement to all of you. If you think it is a myth, you make a fist. And if you think it's a fact, you keep your palm open, right? You sort of, you instruct the entire class to do this. But before that, you have to prepare a list of certain statements which are indicative of either myth or fact, relating to this particular different challenges that they go through in this age phase of development, or different kind of experiences that they might go through, right? So feel free to get creative with that. In fact, we can go to the next slide. This is an example of how it could look like. So you end up asking to the entire class, if a person says no to someone who likes them, they are being rude or weak. Right? This is a simple statement. You throw it out to the class and you ask them. You either close your fist or you keep it open, indicating whether it's a myth or fact, right? And wait for their response. Go to the next slide. As displayed, it's actually a myth, right? So you sort of, invite one or two people from the classroom who might be open to sharing why they think it's a myth versus why is it that they think it's a fact. Be open to sort of, ask them open-ended questions wherein they are able to sort of respond their ideas around it, wherein they are able to, if you're able to provide that non-judgmental attitude towards them, chances are high that they will open up and they will share what makes them think it's a myth versus fact. And then you can sort of, back it up with more appropriate responses if at all they have confused a myth with a fact, and vice versa. All right. I think respecting time, we would move to the next slide.
Yes. Thank you, Bhavna, for taking us through and kickstarting this session for us on a great note. So just in interest of time, we're going to rush through the next couple of strategies that we have. So just a request to participants to just note down key information that they would like to try in the classroom right now. And two, if you did not understand any activity, just write down the name. A lot of the information is available on Google, the instructions for those activities as well. Or you could always write to us towards the end slide. We'll give you our email ID. You could always write to us. And just to start, a participant also mentioned that there's an activity on constitution of kindness. Usha Priyeshji has mentioned that in a school they have a constitution of kindness that promotes each and every person's right to be kind, and that's fantastic. That's a great way to build social awareness and skill. So I'd like to request all participants to also note down or mention any activity in their school that is working well for them or they'd like others to try in their school. Okay. Bhavna told us how can we understand social skills, right? But how can we really practice it in the classroom? One is through cooperative games. Games sometimes is often seen as very disruptive or noisy, makes the classroom noisy. But actually, if it's structured well, if instructions are given, rules are followed, norms are in place, it's a great way to learn social skills. So one is a basic treasure hunt, right? Where they work in groups. The idea is to work in groups towards a common goal. Because this is how they will be interacting later in adulthood and otherwise in other social settings. So treasure hunt is a great way where there are clues, and as a group they have to find each clue and then reach their final goal or their target. There's also a straw and band game. So using straw and band as resources, they have to make a tower, but they have to again do it in groups, and there's a time limit. So here they have to communicate well, problem solve in time, invite each other's perspective, and figure out a common model, a common tower model. It's also important to have small and large group activities based on the topic of the classroom. This need not be a separate intent. It could be integrated in your lessons, right? So you don't have to plan separate time for this, where for example, Socratic seminar, I'll just go to the next slide. Socratic seminar is when there is one small group inside and when there is a large group outside. Now the small group, that is the chairs in this image, is given up. You're going to talk about a particular text, right? Particular story, or if it's a social science lesson about a particular king or an event that happened, and you're just going to invite these students to discuss certain questions. The teacher's role here is very minimal. They will only ask the question, right? And then they will invite all the students in the inner circle to just discuss their point of view, what is their answer. But this is not a debate. This is different from a debate, because here together they have to come to a particular conclusion, right? If they think what the character did was right, or if the character is similar to their personality, why and why not. So they just have to discuss it. There is no right or wrong answer. And the circle outside is just observing them on their skills. What are the skills this group is using? Are they respectful of each other? What are the values in place? Are they maintaining time? So there's just observers, and then they will give feedback and reverse this role. So Socratic seminar, again, there's a lot of information, a lot of questions that teachers can use, and it's available online on Google. Going back, we could also have quizzes regarding your same subject matter. It need not be a separate class for this, but just in group format, so that they are able to discuss the answer and come to a common answer. So that would require a lot of problem solving, a lot of active listening that Bhavna spoke to us about. So all these skills come into place. Assertiveness, and there's also interviews where students learn to interview each other. So again, this could be related to a particular character that you're introducing in your classroom, or a particular event that might have happened in the world, and students just interview each other on their perspectives. So this way they are learning how to communicate and ask questions in a respectful manner, even if this topic is sensitive in nature. Icebreakers are a great way for just students to learn about their classmates, right? Beforehand, knowing how to handle social relationships, you need to have social awareness, right? As Bhavna spoke about diversity and inclusivity, we need to really know who are we speaking to, who is in my classroom, where do they come from, how would they like to be respected, because we all prefer to be respected and approached differently, right, based on our cultural context. So some of the icebreakers are spectrum activity, where you give a statement and you ask students to, if they agree to the statement, they stand on one side of the classroom. If they disagree, they stand on the other side of classroom. So the students start to learn about each other. This is called dice breaker. So you have take a dice and a student throws the dice. Based on the number that comes on the dice, they answer the question. This is just to learn about each other, not just as a person I'm learning a subject matter with, but who is this person as an individual, right? Because they have so many values and they come from different places. So who is this person? And just to be respectful and just be kind and know our classmates. The other one is bingo. This is again a simple. This just takes 5 minutes in the morning, right? You start off the day on the note or end the day. Just the statements could be different based on the cultural context of your classroom. But as the teacher reads out the statement, if the student follows that statement, or that statement exists in their lifestyle, or they just strike it out, so then they discuss, how many of them have gone on a vacation, how many of them got 8 hours of sleep last night. So it's just a way to understand how the classroom as a whole is doing. Okay, so that's about icebreakers. There's also two truths and a lie. So the students say two truth, and the other students have to guess three statements, which of them is a truth and which of them is a lie. I'm just going to rush ahead. Okay, another way of understanding, students, adolescents often face this question, which if I have a conflict with somebody, when do I approach the conflict? Should I just leave the conflict? Should I just not get into it? Or when do we compromise? So this is Thomas Kilman model. They say that you should, the student, adolescent, always follow this, but it's a good way of just educating this. Sometimes it might be helpful for them, so they can take a decision of how they want to approach a conflict with somebody based on the importance of the goal, right? And also the importance of the relationship to them. So if it is a high goal and important high relationship for them, then they will start collaborating with the person. But if the person does not really hold an important place in their life, or the goal is also not important, it's a very small task, it's a very small matter, then just avoiding it might be better. If they have to, if the person is really important, the goal is low, so the stakes are low, it might not really affect them, might not be a big deal for them, but the person is really important, so then they can start accommodating the other person's needs. So this way the student can just, maybe once in a while reflect, should I engage in this conflict with somebody, and if yes, how far do we need to go, or can we resolve this at a earlier stage, what needs to be done. Also, conflict resolution, one is to identify and express their needs, just and simply stating what are they feeling very clearly, what is their body feeling if we are unable to identify what their mind is feeling. How is their state of mind? Is it numb? Is it very calm? So this way the student can easily share their experience and resolve a conflict. It's encouraged for teachers to help students pause and before reacting. So often in a conflict we want to jump to a conclusion and say our point, but just take a step back, think, gather our thoughts, gather our emotions, and then state it and just respond to it instead of reacting to it. Bhavna spoke about I statements. It's also important to invite other people's perspectives. So in the conflict, there's always at least two people or more. So to invite perspectives, just understand what the other person went through. How was it for you? I'm sorry I said this. Did you feel bad? So just inviting other person's perspective and then just listening to them if we are unable to fully understand them or accept it. And also it's important to identify what needs to change, so that at the end of every conflict, both parties or more can really know what do we need to do now going forward. We had a conflict which we couldn't avoid, maybe it just happened. We spoke about it, but what do we need to do about it? What's going to change either in our relationship or with regard to a particular task? Do we involve other people? So just identifying what needs to change is also important. um, Yes, another way to, I spoke about, perspective taking. A way of perspective taking is restorative practice. So in the classroom, this happens in a group setting. So for this to happen, one, the teacher, the educator should feel comfortable to conduct this with a group of students, and also the students need to be comfortable being in the same space. Now, these students are people who are part of a conflict, right? So they need to be comfortable enough to share their thoughts in the same space as the other person. So restorative practice is nothing but a way of working with a conflict that you are collaboratively just sharing perspective and understanding how do we go about it. So just some of the questions the teacher can ask, and the teacher leads the conversation, just asks the question saying, from your point of view, what happened, who was affected, and how have you or others been affected. what in this that something happened between both of you, what was the what has been the hardest? Maybe it might be apologizing, maybe it might be just eat. Sometimes we stop eating, we might have problems sleeping because of a conflict that might have happened with someone important. So just asking what's been hardest, what are feelings, thoughts, or needs that are still with you, from the conflict. They might still feel tense, they might still feel scared to come to school the next day. They might just their needs might be different, so making space for that. And what would you like to happen next? This is where we identify what needs to change, right? What will help in keeping things right, anything you want to ask for. So just making space for both people. And this is important because often we don't create space for both the parties to come to the same place and have make it a discussion, right? And then understand how they can support each other going forward. And yes, just the benefits. So identifies who has been hurt. People can share their feelings, their thoughts. All voices are heard. So not just the person who has been hurt, but also the often the person. Sometimes if it's a person who has bullied somebody else, often they are just neglected or punished. But here we are inviting them to share their experience. Repairs the relationship and improves the standing of those who caused harm. So it allows people to take ownership and responsibility of their actions. Um, it identifies how can we repair the harm. So going forward, what is going to change? And participants who are impacted have an active role, right? You're making it a safe space for them to share how they have been feeling and how they have been impacted by a particular event. Okay, the last part is just how can we reinforce desirable behavior. So in a social context, we want everybody needs to feel safe, and so for that we need to ensure everybody behaves in a safe manner. So you can token economy is just appreciating positive behavior. When there's negative behavior, you take out the token from, it could either be a particular spot where you've given the token to them. It could be a chart paper with pockets. You give targeted praise, so you praise effort that have been made that are cultural and also culturally responsive. So sometimes students might not be okay receiving praise in a large group, but sometimes they might want one-on-one feedback or praise. So just culturally responsive praise and relevant reinforcers. Maybe an 18-year-old might not care about a star, but they might actually care about extra time doing an activity that they like. And also consistent reinforcement. So when you're doing small group or large group activities, just consistently reinforcing the rule so that everyone is aware of how to behave and everybody feels safe emotionally, mentally, and physically. This can happen at the beginning or at the end of the day as well. So yes, this is how token economy works. You can have pockets, and students can get their tokens based on their behavior. If they perform, if the behavior is desirable, this is especially for early adolescents where they might these tokens might inspire them to behave in a certain way. So just reinforcing positive behavior, and when they behave in unhelpful ways, we remove the token so that it's more visible to them. Okay, that's about it. Thank you so much for all the responses. I've been trying to read the chat simultaneously, but thank you for being participative throughout this 1 hour webinar that we've had.
I thank you. That was really a very, very interesting and a very informative and instructive session for our community of teachers. So, thank you, Kavya and Bhavna. I'm sure all our teachers have gotten a lot of takeaways from this session. Let me just, summarize a few of the main ones. That there was a lot of it, but I just try to go quickly through the main ones. So, as you all pointed out, adolescence is most important for social development because this is when the teenagers are moving from the confines of the home to a larger social environment, and peers suddenly become more important than family. So, they're going through a lot of development, identity development. This is an exploratory mode. There's internal conflict, role confusion, and it's also a time for career choices, for figuring out their interests, for recognizing gender that they can relate to, for sexuality, values, and opinions. And they have conflict with parents, authority. There's bullying, and for teachers, it becomes a very tricky situation. However, teachers play such an important role in the lives of adolescents that if they are equipped, as you've done, as you've had them be, with different actionable steps and strategies. So of course, some of them are building awareness of social skills for the, for our adolescents, help them learn good communication skills and model them as well, right? As teachers, help them understand what active listening is, what is using nonverbals, using I statements rather than just you know rather than accusing somebody that you've done this to me. Rather, I felt sad that you did, that something like this happened. Teachers, of course, have to go into the classroom being very mindful of diversity and inclusion. And I really liked some of the activities that you suggested for helping teenagers practice social skills. Myth and fact, where you make a fist or you open your hand. Then, of course, you mentioned a lot of cooperative games, enacting scenarios, small and large group activities. Also, for conflict resolution, you suggested, help students take a pause, take a step back, respond rather than react. And then, of course, restorative practice, where the teacher helps, in collaborating and sharing perspectives. Teacher asks questions in a non-judgmental way, and the aim is to focus on repairing the harm rather than trying to, find out what happened. Of course, that. So reinforcing desirable behaviors, targeted praise, relevant reinforcement. I thought these were extremely useful things that you've mentioned, that teachers can take with them, that teachers are now equipped with when they go into the classroom. So thank you everyone, of all of you who are in the teaching community, who are in the CENTA community, for joining us today. I hope that all of you have filled out the feedback form, and we hope to see all of you in the next and the last webinar of the series next Monday on December 11th, Unlocking Potential, Enhancing Cognitive Development in Adolescents. So a very good evening to all of you, and have a lovely week. And thank you so much again, Kavya and Bhavna, for this very, very very, very interesting and very, very educational session.
Thank you, Alokverna. Thank you so much. And thank
Thank
you for
you.
summarizing it all so well, in within no time. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alokarna. Thank you, all the teachers, all the
All the teachers who
participants who
attended.
joined and who've shared strategies that worked in their schools, classrooms,
Schools.
and it was, yes, being so participative.
Bye.